Hey Kev, let's follow this trail over here. This looks like there might be something waiting down there.
All right. Hey, wait a minute. Do you hear that?
Yeah, I thought it was just me. What the heck is that?
I don't know what that is. Whoa, do you smell that too?
That's unbelievable. Hey, look.
What the?
Hey, look, those branches are moving over there.
What the heck is that?
Holy cow, is that what I think it is? Look at that thing.
Oh my God.
It's a freaking Sasquatch. Welcome to the Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters podcast. I am your host, W.J. Sheehan, author of the series of books Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters, oodles of volumes available at Amazon and Audible in paperback, ebook, Kindle, audiobook. Come on, go out and get a copy. And the entire regional book section is just about complete, shy of a few audiobooks. But you could get the Northeast, Southeast, Pacific Northwest, Southwest, Central, Northwest, and my book lady Casey is working on Canada and probably about to wrap that up shortly. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to my brother and co-host, KJ Sheehan. Kev, how are you, bro?
We're good. We got a little snow last night here in North Carolina.
Me too.
Really?
Yeah, I woke up this morning and I looked outside and just like a dusting, you know?
Yeah, it was snowing like crazy here, probably at about 9 p.m. last night, and I was super excited, like maybe it would be something significant, which, it's Saturday here, so it's no big deal, And, but unfortunately, like before I went to bed, I looked out again and it was like freezing rain. So then I was like, oh no, I hope we don't lose power. But it's just like a icy, snowy coating of about an inch this morning. Nothing dramatic. And now the sun's out.
Now, did you want a snow day today? Is that what you were hoping?
Well, I don't get a snow day, but I like when you never see snow, it's fun to see snow. I understand, up by you and other people in the north, it's like, oh no. But for us, it's like, oh, it's cool, especially as long as you don't have to go to the airport or anything like that. Which I don't today.
Yeah, you catch a break.
Yeah.
You should have a permanent shuttle to the airport for you.
Exactly. Maybe a chopper. Call the chopper.
Hey, I remember the last time I was at the Coliseum, Kev, to see a concert, and it was Roger Waters. And when I was coming through the traffic snafu to get in their lot, a chopper was coming in, like from the city.
Yeah.
And I said, well, here they are. They had an area set aside for the chopper to come in and deliver the boys.
Oh,
boy.
Know? Yeah, that's first class.
That was the Wall concert.
Oh, yeah. Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All in all, we're just another brick in the wall.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Anyways, so what do we have today, my brother, in our Cryptids in the News and Other Oddities segment?
Well, today, Bill, we have, and I know we talked about this a little bit a day or two ago, where we normally don't talk about it, but we have a little bit of a sad story, definitely a sad story, and an interesting story from one of the Bigfoot hotbeds. Mm-hmm. Where I guess on Christmas Eve, not too long ago, so Christmas Eve 24, a couple of gentlemen went missing in Gifford Pinchot National Forest in southern Washington State while they were out searching for Bigfoot. And turns out that they put out a huge search party, drones, helicopters, Coast Guard actually up in the mountains, and I think 60 or so volunteers, brave volunteers, and they found the two gentlemen dead, unfortunately, at age of 37 and 59. They were out looking for Bigfoot and apparently died. The initial finding is they died of exposure.
Yeah. Now, folks, like Kevin said, generally we don't discuss these things beforehand. But I had brought to Kev's attention my friend Jason. Jason, if you're out there, love you, bro. Jason is in a search and rescue team that handles the Olympic National Forest. And he actually brought it to my attention because it involved Bigfoot, in that they told their family members they were going out to look for Bigfoot. And the way Jason said it to me was they had told them they were going to be back Christmas Eve. And when they didn't arrive, naturally calls went out to whatever, the sheriff's department, the powers that be, that these two men were doing thus, and so, and we haven't heard back from them. And the unfortunate end was it took them several days, and they found their bodies. So, but Kev, we kind of settled on this more or less as almost like a public service message, because I had a discussion with Jason, who's a survival expert and part of a volunteer team that practices at their own expense. They buy their own equipment. They are well-skilled woodsmen and locators. Through my discussion with him, he pointed out a lot of things to me, which I think bear discussion today, because there's got to be other people out there that may be planning to do these same things and are just unprepared for what they're getting into.
100%.
So when I started talking to Jason, he said to me, it's always better to go at least as a pair or a team when you're going into the woods. For a lot of reasons, which are obvious, right? If you get injured or whatever, decision making. But during our discussion, I said to Jason, it seems to me that we had a situation develop here where two men, either because maybe one was overriding the other, we don't know, we weren't there, right? But between the two of them, they couldn't make the best decision relative to what to do and how to do it. And it seems that cost them their lives.
Yeah, you would never want to go in hiking into a place like this. I mean, it's a true wilderness. The Gifford Pinchot National Forest, I looked it up. It's 1.32 million acres.
Yeah.
And folks, not familiar with that forest, it's east of Mount Rainier. So, if you've ever seen a license plate for Washington State, you've seen Mount Rainier. It's shown in the middle of most of the versions of license plates. And just north of Mount Adams. So two of the biggest mountains in Washington State. It's kind of in the western third, maybe, of Washington State. But so heading into the Cascades, all the way from like Spokane, Washington in the east, where I used to live, to Seattle, Washington in the west. And just a very rugged place. Tons of wildlife, too, by the way. You'd never do that by yourself. I mean, people do every day, but they're a little cray-cray, Because you twist your ankle or something, what are you going to do? Somebody's got to go for help, You're not going to get yourself out of there, and there's plenty of ways to get hurt, even if you got bitten by a snake or something.
Yeah, now, one of the things that Jason pointed out to me was that this area, of course, depending where you are in the area, can be extremely treacherous to navigate. And the other thing that two people concurred with Jason about was the day they set off, the weather was already snotty.
Yeah, it looks like it's been pretty rainy there, which is no surprise. I went back and looked at the weather, though. It's interesting, in researching the story, Bill. Next time you talk to Jason, it'd be interesting to get his take. And it's pretty cool. Mount Rainier National Park has a current weather, and you can go back in time and look at past weather.
Okay.
So when I go back to like December 22nd, December 23rd, December 24th, the low temperature is in the 40s in the park, which is interesting, but it's definitely rainy and windy.
Yeah, now these two guys told me there was snow, sleet, and rain going on.
Yeah, so it must have been at elevation then, of course,
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. I have no reason to discredit Dave.
Oh, and I'm not trying to discredit him. I'm saying let's ask him, because I expected when I went to look at this, Bill, when they said they died of exposure, I thought it was going to be in the 20s. Teens and 20s, which of course it does get to those temperatures there. Who knows what's going on the chart I'm looking at too. But very rustic place, very rural place, probably no cell phone coverage, definitely no electricity if your battery dies and stuff like that.
Right.
And just tragic story.
Yeah, now, so if you die from exposure, let's face it, you could have temps in the 40s and some wind blowing, mixed precip falling down from the sky. If you don't have really proper clothing to be exposed for, say, 72 hours, you're going to get wet. It's going to get through to your body, and that process is going to begin. Now, two things. Jason mentioned that, Bill, he said, you could just take a couple of contractor black garbage bags from like the Home Depot, those thick ones. You could fold them up and shove them in your pack or even in your pocket, and you can make a very good protective garment against the elements. You see people at football games doing this stuff.
I was going to say, Bill, I think I saw you in Home Depot walking around with that.
Where you just pop a hole for your head and two arms, and you've got thick plastic coverage.
Ideally, you pop a hole for your head. You could also just cut two eye holes.
And become the unknown contractor. Hey, everybody, it's me, the unknown comic. Remember that madman on the Gong Show?
Yeah, but that's absolutely true, and it is good to have some extra stuff. And again, I'm not being critical of these poor souls that are dead. The sheriff's office that investigated it, he said their cause of death appears to be because of, quote, exposure based on weather conditions and ill preparedness, close quote. So
there you go, man.
It didn't have to be that cold, but you get wet and it's windy, and then you're like, you're freezing, and in the rescue pictures, and folks, you can Google this. I saw a good article on BBC, but basically there's 100 articles out there, and they're all the same. It's the same news clipping from probably the local sheriff or wherever the story came from originally, but they have the same photograph of the rescuers crossing over like a little brook on a aluminum extension ladder. So they laid it down across this stream, I guess you'd call it. It looks about 12 feet across and roaring. And there is some snow on the ground and some leaves on the ground, and they're crawling across this extension ladder.
Right, so you don't want to get your feet wet at any time if you can afford not, especially stepping in water.
All kinds of waterproof garb, hoods up, etc.
Yeah. Now, the other thing was fire starting. Now, folks, you can get these, what are they, magnesium blocks, Kev? where you could shave off the metal and ignite it with like
the flint block.
Yeah, and that is waterproof. You could knock that stuff down in a rainstorm and it'll burn.
Yep.
And so who knows what, if anything, they had. Fire is essential to survival, and some of these things can start a fire in a freaking storm. So if you're going out in the woods, you should have some type of real capable quality fire starting material with you. And those blocks with that, what do you call that the flint? But it's really like a rat tail file on the side, that raspy metal thing that you could strike a knife blade against.
Yeah.
Right, and make a spark, I had one of them. I don't have it anymore because where am I hiking? I'm not doing anything, Kev. I don't even know what happened
Maybe in
to
the
that thing.
parking lot of Home Depot when you're wearing that bag over there.
That's right. But I remember using that thing, and you could take the knife that it came with. You could, like, hack or shave pieces off of that block. And then when you struck the knife edge against that flint, the sparks would ignite those metal shavings, and, man, they burned.
Yeah.
There was nothing, you could spit on them and you weren't going to put them out. So, like we say, folks, it's tragic, right? But we don't want tragedy to end in tragedy. We're trying to make a point here of bringing this as a public service to our listeners. If you're thinking about doing anything like this, think twice. And like I say at the end of the podcast, always carry more gun than you think you're going to need. That's not advice, folks. That is of necessity. And the same thing stands true for you going into the woods. You need to be dressed. You need to have gear. You need to have backup. And another thing that we got on, Kev, was the availability of personal locating devices today. You can get one from anywhere from $50 to like $400, and that will send a signal up to a satellite, and these signals are watched by like the sheriff's department. Who knows who all is looking at them?
Coast Guard, and I mean the Coast Guard watches them even on the land side.
That's correct. And so somebody is going to know that an emergency signal went out, and they are going to have a location on you, and something is going to get airborne or whatever to try to locate you. It's not going to be ignored. So interesting. And another thing, Kev, this just goes on and on. Jason pointed out to me that in my iPhone, I have an SOS. Did you know that?
Well, you have in your latest iPhone, if you have iPhone 16, you have satellite connectivity on it for SOS.
Right. Now, I have a 12, and Jason told me that if you send that or attempt to make that SOS call, even if it doesn't go through, it's still going to register as an attempt and give a location.
Only if you have connectivity, though.
Okay, so you don't think I have it on the 12?
You don't have satellite for sure.
So, okay. So, At any rate, wherever we're going, anything is better than nothing, and you should be prepared. Especially the personal locator. Those things, like, you're talking about life and limb here. I mean, a $50 or $100 locator is nothing if you're going to be marching around in the wilderness for a day or days.
Oh, no doubt about it.
I was told by Jason that a lot of the people that they find in the Olympic National Forest, if they're fortunate enough to be found, were unprepared for what they encountered during their hike. That's what happened to them.
100%. Bill, I mean, I've done a lot of hiking, as you know, but like I've hiked across the Grand Canyon, and you wouldn't believe, the people that you see going down into the Grand Canyon, and I don't mean going down 100 yards and turning around. I mean, their plan is to go down to the bottom and come back up from one side or the other, and they got like a Yeti glass from their car to drink out of. You know, a Yeti tumbler.
Yeah, ridiculous.
And you know, I'm going down. I got a backpack on my back with 4 liters of water in it. You know, and food and a first aid kit, and you know, and just to backtrack a little bit on that SOS call. So I want to be clear on that because it could save somebody's life. On your older iPhone, Bill, you have the ability of placing an emergency call, an SOS. So if you know, my recollection is if you go to shut off the phone, you'll get a screen that comes up that says either slide to power off, medical ID, or emergency call. And I think if you place, so double underline this, if you place that SOS call, it will try to make contact, and even if you don't have a signal, it'll persist. So, like, you know, if you happen to wander into an area or fall into an area that has some coverage or the coverage changes, it will send that data that you were in trouble. So that's good. That's useful. But the newest phones, the 16, actually have satellite connectivity for emergencies.
Okay. See, now I see that SOS when I power down.
Right.
But I also went into settings while the phone was lit. And under settings, there's an SOS.
Yeah, same probably thing. But the newer phones, which is pretty cool. I just got a newer phone, and I was on a plane. Day before yesterday, like I normally am. And when you're flying, instead of seeing like the bars and the 5G logo or whatever, you actually see an image of a satellite.
Oh, okay.
You know, and it's talking to the satellite. And now they did it originally when they first released the iPhone 6 months ago. My understanding is Apple did it solely for emergencies, but now it'll actually let you use their messaging service, iMessage, you know, their text messaging service while you're on a plane, for example. So pretty cool.
Interesting. Well, you know, Kev, I think we've done this justice. In bringing it to the listeners' attention, you know, because I'm sure that there are listeners to this podcast who are doing things like this or planning to do things like this, and my God, you just got to protect your life and limb against, in this case, the elements, because Mother Nature is going to win. Just like Bigfoot's going to kick your ass if you're not prepared to defend against them should they attack.
Yeah.
So it's just dire consequences that such a thing should have happened to these poor men and their families now. And our hearts go out to them. Our hearts, our minds, our prayers go out to them and their families. What a tragedy, you know, and coming into Christmas Eve to have to deal with that, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before I continue here, I want to give a shout out to Greg the Bouncer's mother, Rita May, from Medford, Massachusetts. And I'm laughing inside right now. Hey, Kev, do you remember on Bewitched, the TV show? Do you remember?
Yeah.
You remember Gladys Kravitz?
Was that the mother-in-law?
No, that was
the neighbor. The neighbor.
Right. Andorra was the mother-in-law, and she used to call Darren Durwood just to piss him off. But Gladys Kravitz was the lady who was always watching their house through the curtains.
Exactly, seeing the crazy stuff go on and stuff.
Yeah, and the husband would be sitting there with his spectacles on reading the paper like, all right, Gladys, you know. Well, listen, Greg said his mom is always peeking around the neighborhood. Rita May, we love you, Rita May. And Greg said he's buying her a pair of binoculars to help her out.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, so to be continued, Greg is a bouncer. Big old boy out in California. He watches this nightclub, and he always sends me videos out of the the bands that are playing there. You know, he sends me these little clips. And we were talking the other day about the wildfires out there. I wanted to know if anything was near his neighborhood, you know. Thankfully, he's okay. I think he's in Hermosa Beach. Hermosa?
That sounds right from when you told me last time, Bill. But
yeah, I think so.
I mean, that's in the areas where fires are generally, you know, Laguna Beach and and he's pretty close to L.A. He's in L.A., I think. Hermosa Beach is probably part of L.A. County.
Now he told me.
There.
Yeah, it is scary, and he sent me some pictures. He said, "Bill, this is criminal." He showed me a picture of like a reservoir that was bone dry.
Yeah.
There was no water in it at all. And these people really dropped the ball. Apparently, they have gravity flow hydrants there. But if there's nothing in the pool above them to drain via gravity, you've got nothing.
Well, it's also a tragedy, and I haven't researched it, so forgive me, folks, but it's a tragedy that, you know, people are dying in these fires and losing possessions in these fires, and it's a coastal state, you know.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay, the reservoirs are empty. The people, I had read some fire hydrants are missing because for some reason somebody stole fire hydrants. I don't know.
Yes.
And then, you know, you're on the coast. Like,
yeah. How about running some heavy duty hoses into the ocean and pumping all the freaking water you want?
I don't know. You know.
Yeah. I don't get it. National Guard should be in there. I mean, it's been going on so long now that you think resourceful minds could come into play here and at least aid and abet in what's going on there with a little forward thinking, folks. My God. Anyways, Kev.
Yeah.
How about I break into a nice Bigfoot account?
Let's go.
Okay. So, guys, I'm going back into the archives a little bit here to one of the strangest and most profound accounts I had ever taken. And, of course, nobody has listened to all of the accounts, or very few people have. And it's worth re-upping some of these just to open your eyes to what some people are experiencing out there relative to Bigfoot. So this rather chilling account was brought to my attention by a bow hunter. His name was Shane Barkley, and this is what Shane had to share about what happened to him on an early September morning in Tennessee. As I mentioned to you when I first contacted you, Bill, this was the craziest damn thing imaginable. And if it hadn't happened to me personally, I wouldn't have believed it. I still live and hunt in Tennessee, but haven't been back to this area that I'm about to tell you about since the day of this incident, and with good reason. Prior to September 14th of 2014, this was one of my all-time best hunting spots without exception. On this particular day, the forecast was for clouds and drizzle in the morning, with skies clearing in the afternoon. I had hiked in about a half mile or so to a place where I always left a stand fixed in a tree. In fact, I had just replaced this stand because the old one there was getting rusty. That should tell you something in and of itself as to just how fond I was of this location. The area was comprised of some of the thickest, most tightly packed forest you'll ever navigate. The bushes and trees in here, starting from ground level and working their way up, were layered in height and density, if not for the occasional game trail. Were layered in height and density. And if not for the occasional game trail, I don't believe that anyone in their right mind would attempt coming in here. But nobody ever said that I was in my right mind. I had made my way into this spot and was already comfortably sitting in the stand just at the break of dawn. My stand was fixed at a height of about 25 feet, with climbing pins turned into the tree all the way up to it. I'm going to do my best now to describe to you exactly where I was sitting and what it was that I could and could not see, as well as telling you why it was that I had chosen this area for my stand in the first place. This patch of forest was what I will call a depression within a depression. The surrounding area was a valley in between a pair of hills that were around 600 feet in elevation. There was an old and well-used game trail that ran just to the left of my stand and off due north, which was directly in front of me when sitting in the stand. The vast majority of the brush was between, say, 4 and 8 feet tall, which one could by no means hunt in unless you could rise above it and look down the trail. On most days, as was the case on this morning, this bowl, as I will call it, was filled with a damp, foggy mist that would eventually dissipate, but not until generally 9 a.m. or later. My sight range from the seat was about 75 feet at best in all directions, and then the trees and brush seemed to vanish into the mist. It's a very ethereal thing to sit here alone, and it's even spooked me on more than one occasion. So, as I was sitting in hopes of my prey coming down the trail at any moment, I began to hear what I will describe to you as being owls. There were little hoots and screeches coming in succession. It had started as one, and then progressed to the point where there were numerous screeches and hoots, all of which were coming from directly in front of me to my north. Being a hunter, it's virtually impossible for me to share with you in a few moments why I say what I'm about to tell you. But the fact of the matter is, and was, that to me, these sounds were not real. In other words, to my trained ear, knowing what the area's owls sound like, how they make their calls, and what time of day they make their calls, I knew these were fake. Simply put, something or someone was mimicking owl calls. One of the most telling aspects was the amount of calls being made and the fact that they were all in one area. The imagination can play some strange tricks on one's mind, especially when you're alone in the mist and in such a location. So I began to feel a sense of dread, and a cold chill ran through my body, a shiver. At that moment in time, and for the first time since I had been coming here, which must have been several dozen or more, I was wishing I had brought a gun instead of a bow. I had never felt this way before, as I just said. It was as though my psychological state was taking a tumble out of control, and there was nothing I could do to control my thoughts and my emotions. As if things couldn't get worse, they did. There was now so much hooting and screeching going on that it sounded like a war party was going on in the fog in front of me. The thought had crossed my mind to climb down out of the stand and make my way out. But that thought was countered by that of just staying put, because I would be safer sitting off the ground. My heart was racing. Sweat was actually dripping on my brow. I couldn't believe how frightened I was, and it was escalating. Now, what happened next, Bill, was beyond belief. If you've never sat in or seen a folding tree stand, I was sitting on the seat portion, and my feet were resting on what I will call the floor of the stand. You can see through the entire stand and its components because it's more of a weave of steel as opposed to being solid plate, which is done, of course, to keep it as lightweight as possible. My back was against a tree, maybe 16 inches in diameter, And I would say 20 or 25 feet off the ground, which means that my feet were about 20 feet off the ground. And as I sat there, trembling, sweating, and by the way, having seen nothing up to this point, I suddenly felt something grab the heel of my boot. I immediately jumped to the point of almost falling out of the stand, and as I turned my head to look down to my left, I was staring into the grimacing face of a huge Sasquatch. He was looking directly up at me, having snuck up behind me, and was reaching up with its left hand to grab hold of my boot. That very moment that I jumped, he let go and just stood there, kind of swaying and watching me. As he stood there, the thought ran through my mind that all the rest of the activity and noises were just a distraction, which allowed this beast to walk up on me unaware. Now, the thought of putting a broadhead right between his eyes was just one of many thoughts that was racing through my mind. I expected at any moment that he was going to grab the foot tray and yank the stand out of the tree to devour me. The size of this thing was unbelievable, and I don't expect you or anybody else to believe me either. He was grabbing at my heel with his hand, say 20 feet from the ground. You could do the math as to what type of size that equates into. It was just seconds after he held my heel that he let go. The funny thing was that the grasp was not done with much, if any, pressure at all. It was as if it wanted me to know that it could do whatever it wanted, including sneaking up on me and touching me. Then it turned and walked straight down the trail in front of me. And as he did so, all of the noises stopped. The woods had suddenly and unexpectedly become deadly silent. I think he took about 10 steps to cover the 75 feet and disappeared into the mist and the trees. It was at that moment that I realized I was pissing in my pants. I have no idea why. Call it caused by trauma or whatever you will, but I was peeing in my pants. Let me just make an adjustment here. I leaned with my back against a tree for almost 2 hours in somewhat of a delirium, feeling as though I was in some type of hard narcotic state, which had rendered me unable to think or act, and so I sat. I remember looking at my watch at 9:30 a.m. when I decided to move down the ladder. Everything for me at that moment in time was happening in slow motion. At least that's the way I perceived it. It seemed as though it took 20 minutes to get down the ladder, after which I sat under the tree for another half hour or more. I was staring down the trail where the Bigfoot had walked away, and I have no idea why. I was in a complete and utter daze. I remember looking at my watch when I finally had reached the car, and it was almost noon, having begun my morning in the stand only a half mile from where I had parked. It was as if this encounter, and during it as well, that time stood still. Yes, it was still passing, but I was totally and completely disconnected from reality. That week, I called out of work sick for 8 days. It took me that long to recover. I went back into the spot months later after winter had set in. And as I stood beneath the stand, I tried to make some sense of the events that day. I looked up at the seat and visualized him reaching up and grabbing my boot. To do so, to me, he would have had to been able to be 14 or 15 feet tall. That in itself is bizarre, folks. With his arm extended beyond that. This arm would have been 7 or 8 feet long. The game trail was only perhaps 2.5 feet wide, and this beast, with its back to me, seemed to be at least 3 times the trail's width at its shoulders. It had long gray and white hair with dark gray skin that was visible on its face and hands, as well as the upper chest as I looked down at it. Thinking back, the face seemed to have an incredibly evil smile, But is that how I was just perceiving him? Perhaps as Bigfoot go, he was very handsome and actually smiling at me. The fact is that he grabbed my boot very gently. He could have easily torn me and my chair from the tree, and that would have been the end of it and me, but he didn't. That's what has left me so puzzled. When he was walking away from me, I felt as though anesthesia was taking effect before surgery. That moment in time when suddenly you are drifting off and then you can't remember anything. However, I had taken nothing and had only the encounter to blame it on. It was the most bizarre event of my lifetime. And now, Bill, you are part of it. What do you make of that, Kev?
Yeah, I remember that one from years ago. And, at the time, I was like, how could something be that tall? And now sitting here, I'm thinking, I wonder if it was like climbing up the tree, right? Because he said it had a 16-inch diameter tree, roughly. So that's a big tree. Maybe it was shimmying its way up and he didn't realize it or something, or he forgot about it because he's in trauma after having a hairy man grab your foot,
Yeah, he said to us, he felt like he was under the influence of a hard narcotic and that everything had just gone away. The passage of time didn't make sense. Sitting under the tree, sitting in the stand,
Yeah, 100%.
What a bizarre... to be honest, when I last told this podcast, Kev, September 5th, 2020.
All right, so 5 years, 5 years ago, plus.
5 years ago. And what a bizarre state of affairs. Now, I have heard people talking about these owl noises.
Yes, yeah, the hooting.
Right, and some of them have referred to them as being bionic. In other words, to a trained ear, they sound like they're generated by a device or something. They don't sound natural. And this is what this fella Shane was saying. To his ear and his training as a woodsman, the whole thing was out of place, and yet it was going on. Very bizarre, huh?
Very strange stuff.
The Tennessee tree stand incident. Incredible story.
Wow.
Yep. So, and here's a guy going to one of his favorite hunting holes. He's got a tree stand fixed there, like on a permanent basis, and he said he had just replaced it because the old one was getting a little ratty. And he's back at his place. He's familiar with it. He's bagged some deer there before, or whatever he's hunting for. And here...
Oh, I lost you, Bill. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here, Kev. Oh, and pardon us, folks. We're having a little weirdness here today with our hookup. Apparently, this thing snuck up on him and gently grabbed the heel of his boot. Which in and of itself is weird, right? Just kind of touching you, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Like, Tag, you're it. You come get me now.
Yeah, well, like he said, what are you to think other than it just wanted me to know that it could sneak up on?
I'll tell you what, I usually have an opinion. I have no idea on this one.
Yeah.
It's a freak show.
Yeah, it's a freak show. So let's move on. What do we have in our what do we have in our listed mail, Kev?
Yeah, we did that already, Bill.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Yeah, our first email comes in from our friend Kathy in Maine. And she says, well, boys, you certainly made me laugh. So, Bill, you bought the book I told you about. And she's talking about the Struwelpeter, or Shock-Headed Peter.
Yeah. Yes, I did, Kathy.
I just knew from listening to you over the years that you would get a kick out of that. And she says, yes, my Oma used to read that to us. Well, we used to ask her to. But kids love to be scared. But can you imagine reading that to kids these days? social services would lock you up for sure. Some truth to that. Don't do that or you'll get your fingers cut off like Strupita.
Well, there's something to be said out of shock and awe because, I have a coworker who was born and raised in Latvia. And when I showed her this book, she was familiar with it, but said that her grandmother's book was worse.
Ooh.
And her grandmother used to read her tales, and they brought kids up different over there from what Paula has told me, Kev.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, when they were in lower grade school, they brought them out into the woods with a compass, and having trained them how to use a compass, allowed them to find their way out. Now, think of doing that in this day and age with like 6 or 7-year-olds. They're very soft and everything's kind of wishy-washy today. But these people were really trying to raise up, adults eventually that could kind of take care of themselves.
Some battle-hardened 7-year-olds.
Yeah, come on, man.
Yeah, no, it's a different world. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse.
Yeah, no, I know, yeah. But that's the way it was. And Paula, I would say Paula, my coworker, is probably, I'm bad with ages now, I want to say she's probably 30, 35. Mm-hmm. So her grammar school wasn't all that long ago.
Right.
Over in Latvia.
Yeah. Well,
it's not like we're talking about, me in the 60s,
Right.
So, yeah, interesting, But go ahead, Kev. Nice to hear from you, Kathy.
Yeah. And our last email, Bill, comes from Brad, and he says, "Greetings, KJ and WJ. I hope you all are doing well. I wanted to write in and ask KJ if he's ever heard of a cryptid known as Akhlut. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. Akhlut.
Akhlut.
He says, I ran across this cryptid via Reddit. It's part of the Inuit folklore, so up north in the Inuit nation, up in Canada. Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes described as, get this, an orca-wolf hybrid that takes the form of a killer whale in the water, but once on ground, it takes on some similarities of a wolf.
Wow.
I went to Wikipedia to read up on this cryptid, and it sounds interesting and terrifying at the same time. Thank you both for all you do in bringing your stories and keeping us listeners entertained. God bless you both, and God bless your listeners, Brad."
Yeah, and Kev, I think the Inuit was the tribe that a couple of years back I had spoke about, that they had that a thing called the 7 Teachings. Mm-hmm. And each teaching was relative to a woodland creature. The eagle, the bear, the beaver, the turtle. And I made the point of mentioning that one of the 7 teachings was relative to a Sasquatch.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
You remember that? And the teaching attached to the Sasquatch, which I said at the time that nobody would ever guess, was honesty. Is that weird?
It's honestly going to rip your head off.
Yeah. Yes, I will rip your limb off and throw you.
I'm going to rip your limb off. I'm honest about it.
I tell you the truth. You will not get away.
When I snarl at you, it is a genuine snarl. I'm not faking.
Kev, you know how my mind works, man, or maybe you don't. I was just thinking of Jerry the German around the corner, the guy that used to work on Mercedes-Benz's out of his property.
Yeah, I know legend of him, but I was too young, so I didn't run into Jerry. I ran into Hans.
Yeah, Hans, I remember you with the Lucas. You know who Lucas is, Kevin?
Yes, the god of darkness.
Well, Jerry used to say, speaking about an automobile, he said, once you have ignition, Do not shut it down. I said to myself, what is this guy, a freaking Panzer tank commander? He thinks people just leave their diesel vehicles running all day and just keep pouring fuel into them?
Why would you not do that?
Don't shut it down. Oh, my God, these guys were out of their minds.
Awesome.
But, it's memories that make me laugh, Kev.
Of
Like
course.
the Hans with the Lucas, the God of Darkness.
Absolutely.
Oh, my God. Well, great part. Kev, how can people get in touch with us if they want?
Yeah, go to our website, BigfootTerrorInTheWoods.com, and click on Contact Us.
Yep.
That's
and
us.
if you've seen something, say something. And another shout out to Tanner. Had a good conversation with Tanner. He's got a little organization. Guys doing some good work out there in Washington State, assisting in searching missing persons and Bigfoot interviews. He's doing all kinds of stuff out there. Really cool guy. Another listener to the podcast. And by the way, folks, if you should find yourself in the woods of Tennessee or in the Gifford Pinchot Forest, you best remember one thing, my friends. Always carry more gun than you think you're going to need. Sleep tight.